So if you don't wish to be recorded, you can switch your video off and still be part of the session. And this is this, not that. Sorry. Move forwards. This is our session today. So we're focused, as I say, on ESOL and literacy. We're very glad to have two fantastic presentations coming up from Cathy Clarkson of Bradford College and Lucy Palmer of Wakefield College. We'll be talking about different aspects of ESOL and literacy from very different perspectives to really give us a kind of broad perspective on the themes. As I said, we've got time for discussion towards the end, which is really good. And then Safina from Mesh is going to tell you a little bit about a new initiative that will be running as a follow-up to this session before we finish at 1:30. We try to make these a quick 1 hour kind of focus session, and we hope that you'll enjoy it. I'm just going to hand over to Emma now to introduce the theme.
Thanks so much, John. It's lovely to see so many of you here today, and I think the reason that we've got so many here is because of the topic, because we're talking about ESOL and literacy, and we've had so many of you ask for this to be talked about as a topic. We're so aware that in your ESOL classrooms there is so much going on, and there is so much for you as practitioners to try and juggle and to try and address and to try and manage. And literacy is just such a huge issue, because if you're working with learners who don't have literacy in their first language, or have low levels of literacy, how on earth are you going to work with them in the ESOL classroom? And that's something we get asked quite a lot, and really does lead to learners just not having familiarity with all of the things that you are trying to work with them on. So as John said, we've got some fantastic presenters who'll be exploring those topics even further, and we really hope they'll be really useful for you in terms of just getting a bit more depth of those issues, and hopefully getting a few strategies that will enable you to start addressing them in your classroom. So we're very much looking forward to that. But first of all, I'm just going to hand over to Claire to do an update from Mesh. Thanks, Claire.
Thank you. Thanks, Emma. Hi, everybody. It's really good to be with you all here today, to see so many people joining us. I'm just sharing my screen with you to show you, first of all, the homepage of the Learning English website. And this, as many of you will be familiar with, is where you can search for English classes for people. Either they can do it themselves or you can help them, and you just put the postcode of the person in here and then choose the distance.
Claire, I don't think your share has yet happened.
Has it not?
No.
Oh, okay.
It's
all right.
for me,
I can see it, John.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Is it just me?
Yeah, it's just you. In the chat they can see it as well. We've had people saying I can see.
Okay.
Carry on, Claire.
Bye.
Okay, sorry. Yeah, okay. Yeah, so choose the distance that you can travel, and then click find your class, and that will bring up classes close to where the person is that you're looking for. Also on this homepage, I just wanted to show you something we added fairly recently, which is our ESOL reading books, which have been developed in the Exploring and Belonging project. And there are links there on the homepage of LEYH to the readers. This resource can also be found in Learning English Plus. And you can see there are some other interesting links for people who are looking to go to university, volunteering resources. I just want to take you across to Learning English Plus, and there is a link to this at the top of the page. And this is the website that is for tutors and providers. And we have our big resources hub here, also the staff room and the training area. I'm just going to click into the resources hub because there's a specific resource that I want to show you. You can see at the top of the page, we have a link to all of our Mesh produced resources. And Safina and Angela specifically work on developing these specific resources. The exploring and belonging that I just mentioned is pinned at the top of the page there, and also a selection of our video resources. But I just want to click into this resources page, because on the can you see there are 2 pages there? If you go to the second page and then go right to the bottom of that page, we have this link, some resources we've developed about transnational families. So if you are doing a theme of family, this specifically talks about the challenges of different generations living together, supporting each other across generations, but also maybe across countries as well. So there's some really interesting things that were developed here in partnership with the University of Reading, and you can see, you can have a look at that more in your own time, but I just wanted to make you aware that that resource is there. So as with all our resources, there's a video, there's a slide resource, and then there are teaching notes, and then all the different things, the keywords, and then different PDFs that you can download there. And they follow the format of all of our resources. So I'll stop there because we've got a lot to get through, and hand back to either Emma or John.
Thanks, Claire. Yeah, I think it's coming back to me. And if I could have the slides back, Stina, that would be amazing. So yes, so my name's Emma Taylor. There's lots of familiar faces in the chat, but new ones as well. So I work for Migration Yorkshire, which is the strategic migration partnership for Yorkshire and the Humber, which basically means that I work with the 15 different local authorities across Yorkshire and Humber and their multi-agency ESOL networks, trying to support with the provision of ESOL and working really closely with MESH so that we can try and have a joined up ESOL network that you can access. So when you get these slides, there's a number of links here, just letting you know that there are some toolkits and some information for you to have a look at. So do take a look at that, and do take a look at the Migration Yorkshire website. So before I hand over, I just wanted as well to let you know that NATECLA, who we also work with, have got a Yorkshire and Humber conference running, which is just in a couple of weeks' time. So if you're not already all booked up for Valentine's Day in the afternoon of Friday the 14th, we've got a face-to-face event going on in Wakefield, at Wakefield College, really looking at the fact that teachers, practitioners need to look after themselves because they have so many pulls on their time and their energy. So it will be a real focus on kind of looking after yourself and specifically addressing the well-being of ESOL tutors. So we very much hope that you can sign up for that, and we can see lots of you there. Okay, thank you so much. I'm going now to introduce Cathy, Cathy Clarkson, who we're delighted is joining us from Bradford College to talk about her ESOL and literacy initial teacher training. So Cathy, let me pass on to you. Thank you.
Thanks, Emma. Just give me a second. I'm going to share my screen. Okay, so I'm hoping that that's come up for everybody. Is that visible? Yeah, come to give me a shout. Is that?
Yeah,
Thanks.
that's good.
Yeah,
Good,
brilliant.
Cathy.
Thank you. Yeah, thank you for inviting me along, giving me an opportunity to talk about our ESOL and literacy ITE courses at Bradford College. I've taken a sort of a reflective approach to this presentation today. And in view of that, I just sort of invite you to maybe do the same in relation to this concept of what do we mean by an ESOL student, or what we mean by a literacy student. Emma's already talked about, you know, it's such a huge issue, isn't it, around ESOL and literacy. And this is something that I've been reflecting on recently. In terms of my background in doing initial teacher education, I originally started as a CELTA tutor. I delivered the CELTA course as part of the Integrated Routes Specialist ITE way back in the noughties when such things existed. These were based on the 2007 framework, and people could come and do the CELTA as a standalone or as part of a full subject specialist qualification. However, with the changes of the policy around needing to be, well, not needing to have a full teaching qualification, you know, sort of responsibility of the organisations rather than a national strategy, those full specialist routes generally well, disappeared. We stopped delivering them at my old college, but I did continue to deliver the CELTA. And I always view this as a dual qualification for those that want to go teach abroad, doing EFL, or those that want as a starting qualification for those teaching ESOL in the UK. And I was always really interested in how to ESOLize the CELTA. It's an internationally recognised qualification. Lots of people do it 4 weeks intensively, but thinking about how, yeah, like I said, how to kind of ESOLize that. I'm recently moved to Bradford just over 18 months ago, and here at Bradford we offer the Trinity Cert ESOL qualification, and I was always aware of this and viewed it as like a sister course to the CELTA. They're just a different awarding bodies, but what I've been learning now, I'm about halfway through the second course that I've been delivering here. I feel that there's much more flexibility with the Cert ESOL in terms of being able to ESOLize this. I'm going to talk a little bit more about that in a minute. Because the other thing that I teach here at Bradford College is that I'm the ESOL and Literacy lead for the specialist PGCE that we run. So here at Bradford, you can do a generic PGCE qualification, you can do a maths specialist PGCE, or you can do an ESOL and Literacy. And my year 2 students are currently on the programme that is related to the 2007 framework, the one that I mentioned, that the integrated routes that I was familiar with, the same framework. So whereas I was familiar with the full ESOL pathway, the integrated ESOL, the programme here is ESOL and Literacy. And again, I'm going to talk a little bit later about what that distinction means. But also what's happened recently with it, we have new ITE framework linked to the occupational standards. So actually the students on our year 1 provision are actually on a different pathway again. So all quite messy and complicated. I hope to try and simplify it a little bit today. And one of the things I've tried to do is to pull all the courses that we offer at Bradford College onto a Wakelet page, just to show here that the different choices people have. There's, as you can see, the Cert ESOL. We offer 1 course a year part-time. You can do the Cert Ed with English, ESOL and Literacy. That's if you've got a level 3 qualification, you would do a certificate in education. If you have a degree, then you can do the postgraduate diploma. That's at level 7. And both those courses can be taken in service or pre-service, full-time or part-time. We also offer the additional diploma, which is if you are a qualified teacher, but you don't and you want to upskill in terms of your ESOL specialism, then you could do the standalone additional diploma. So that's just a quick overview of the provision that we offer. But really back to this question of ESOL and literacy, I think, as Emma was saying, what we generally think of in terms of ESOL and literacy is about those beginner students who maybe not be literate in their own language, or may not be literate in English, may not share, you know, the alphabet with us. And I would always, that's the approach I would take when I covered it on the CELTA. I would do something around the language experience approach, and I started to look at the new to ESOL resources that are available on the ETF website. And both these approaches draw on participatory approaches. And one of the challenges I sort of found with this in terms of introducing these on the CELTA is that the trainees just kind of found it was quite challenging them to understand these participatory approaches, be confident in using them, be confident in their own sort of teaching skills and language awareness. So one of the things I reflect on quite a lot is, when can we start talking about these participatory approaches? Is it an ITE question or is it a CPD question? So that then relates to this other thing that I've been reflecting on recently in relation to the Cert ESOL being ITE and CPD. And this is the makeup of the current course. I have 9 trainees, and of these trainees, 6 of them are already qualified teachers. I only have 3 of them that aren't qualified teachers in terms of this being an ITE qualification for them. One of them, she's taken it, you could argue, as an in-service course, because although she's not a qualified teacher, she has some experience of teaching in the community, doing art-based courses, and she's actually employed as bank staff at the college, and she has 1 class a week with one of those pre-entry low-level ESOL classes that Emma mentioned earlier. I have 2 trainees that you would argue it is an ITE course for them. They have no teaching experience and no background at all. So for them, it's a pre-service initial teacher education. But everybody else on the course are qualified teachers. I have 3 that are employed at the college, 1 in the ESOL department. So she's qualified FE teacher, but her background is in SEND, but she's employed in the ESOL department. So doing the Cert ESOL, because this is the first time she's taught ESOL. The other 2, really interestingly, are in our alternative provision. So teaching our 14 to 16 students. So they've come to the course because they've found increasingly that they're getting students with language needs. They're teaching GCSE English to these 14 to 16 students. So I wanted to come and do the Cert ESOL to understand a little bit more about those students and upskilling themselves in terms of how to support their literacy and passing the GCSE. The other 3, you could argue the Cert ESOL is a CPD course because they're all qualified teachers from different sectors, 1 from FE, 1 from primary, and 1 from secondary. So a real mix of people taking the Cert ESOL, with most of them saying, some of them saying they might be interested in the future of taking it abroad because it is an internationally recognised qualification, but generally they're interested in staying here and teaching ESOL. So the other course that I delivered, I mentioned, is the Cert Ed and the PGCE, and I am the ESOL and Literacy lead because it is this dual pathway, the specialist pathway that we take. But my background is in ESOL, not in literacy. And so what the distinction is here for this ESOL and literacy route is that they need to have 100, if they're an ESOL specialist, they have 100 hours in placement in ESOL, and they also need a second placement of 25 hours in literacy, or vice versa. If they see themselves as a literacy teacher, 100 hours in literacy, and then 25 hours in ESOL. So this raises that question I asked earlier about what it means to be an ESOL student or a literacy student, but actually this question of how we identify as a teacher. Are we an ESOL teacher or are we a literacy teacher? Or is there a combination of these 2? And actually one of the questions I reflect on is it actually related more to the qualification you teach. If you're teaching an ESOL qualification, or like if it's literacy, generally we'd think of here now this idea of GCSE English, because obviously we know the strategy now, isn't it, that all students, if they haven't passed their GCSE English, they have to resit it, and how many of those, yeah, so that throws that into the mix. So just to complicate matters further, in relation again to reflecting on my learning this last 18 months, I had one of my trainees that was in year 2 when I joined the course last year. She definitely identified as a literacy teacher. She had already done her second placement of 25 hours in ESOL. She was very clearly saying, I position myself as a literacy teacher. I teach literacy. However, when I went to watch her observe for the first time with her adult functional skills class, it turned out all the students in that class were language learners, all of them. But she didn't identify as an ESOL tutor. The other example is that I have an ESOL teacher. They identify as an ESOL teacher. They're employed full-time at the college as an unqualified teacher, although they have extensive experience of teaching EFL abroad, just no qualifications for teaching in the UK. And when asked what she would want her sort of second placement to be, she asked for that to be in a GCSE class. So we found an adult GCSE class for her. And what we find, that adult GCSE class, that most of the students are language learners. And those that aren't language learners, there are 3 of them in this class, have specific learning difficulties. So those that would be first language acquisition learners, they have learning difficulties. Everybody else is a language learner. The third example I wanted to share with you is my trainee that is employed. He's full-time, in-service trainee at the college, employed as a GCSE and functional skills tutor in our 16 to 19 department. And when we were discussing about what he would want out of his second placement, he didn't really want to go into the ESOL department and have an ESOL class as we might imagine that. What he asked for is to have his functional skills class, his term, loaded with language learners. So he managed to discuss with his manager, so any students that came in with language needs, he would have them. And so it's really interesting how he identifies as I guess, a literacy teacher, a GCSE and functional skills teacher, and he's exploring some of those ESOL approaches, things like taking inductive approaches to exploring grammar with the students, thinking about activities to develop their vocabulary, things that maybe not be covered so much in the GCSE and functional skills curriculum, but are really important to our language learners. So that question I asked at the beginning in reflection of this, is it an ESOL student? Is it a literacy student? We can add now into the mix of the GCSE research student. Ask this question, what is it that informs that decision about where that student goes? What makes them go into an ESOL class? What makes them go into an adult functional skills class? What makes them go into an adult GCSE class? Yeah, these are the things that I'm reflecting on at the moment. Which leads to the kind of questions that I thought we might be able to discuss when we get to the discussion point. As I said, what informs the decision about where our students go? I think the other thing I'm reflecting on as the lead for the ITE is, what can we all learn from each other? When I have this mix of people that are teaching GCSE or are teaching literacy, functional skills, what can we learn with and from each other? And then for people wanting to get into teaching ESOL, we know that that's also quite complex, but how can we give good IAG to those in relation to the different options they have and where they might find themselves teaching? And maybe as an aside, just because I am interested, as I said, in relation to participatory approaches, just prompts here like pros and cons. What do you think in relation to developing the literacy of our ESOL learners? If anybody's used those new to ESOL resources, I'd be interested in your reflections on that. As it says in here, when did you start using them? Any advice to others? And if you haven't used them, is it a CPD thing? I guess that question I was saying, that reflection between, ITE or CPD. So there's some discussion questions, I think, for later. Just a reminder about the Wakelet that I've put together in relation to if anybody's interested in the courses that we offer. And if I could also do a little plug for upcoming events as well. We've got the ESOL research community on the 24th of April, which is looking at participatory approaches. Mel Cook and other people are coming along to talk about a little bit of a history of participatory ESOL. That's been a theme for us at our ESOL research community meetings this year. You can find all our resources on the Padlet. And Emma and I have the ESOL ITE network coming up this Thursday, if anybody's interested in carry on this conversation about ESOL ITE. That's it from me. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Cathy. That's fantastic. And those questions, I'm sure we'll come back to in the discussion. If you've got questions for Cathy, please do hold them until after we've heard from Lucy, and then we'll pitch all of those questions into the discussion period at the end. But what it gets pointed up to me from that, one thing that occurred to me was the different ways that we understand literacy. So we can have literacy as a sort of opposed to ESOL when you're in the ITE kind of moment. And I remember that thing of doing the ITE and ESOL, making the decisions around the PGCE and doing the different kinds of teaching. But then there's also the idea of literacy for especially pre-entry ESOL learners, and that kind of challenge for them that we have. And I think what Lucy's going to tell us is going to address that point quite directly. So it's Lucy Palmer from Wakefield College. She's an ESOL lecturer at Wakefield College, and she is really thinking about how to address literacy whilst being an ESOL teacher at Wakefield. So I'm going to share my screen again, Lucy, so we bring your slides up.
Yeah,
and then I'll just make sure that I've got that all right. Here we are. Over to Lucy.
all right, thank you. Yeah, so as John said, I'm Lucy. I work at Wakefield College, and I'm an ESOL lecturer, and I've been working with the pre-entry learners. The majority of them are 16 to 18 learners, although I'm starting some new adult pre-entry classes as well, where we're kind of trying the same approach with phonics with the adult learners, because it seems to have been working quite well with the 16 to 18s. So if I could just have the next slide, please, John. Thank you. So yeah, my journey into teaching pre-entry learners. So I've been teaching for 15 years, 14 of those have been at Wakefield College. And up to about 3 years ago, I was mostly entry 3 and level 1 teacher. So 3 years ago, when I started with the pre-entries, I felt like I was completely thrown in at the deep end, didn't really know where to start. So it's been a really steep learning curve. So I did a lot of research into teaching pre-entry, but also teaching phonics, because what I'd found was probably about half of the class at that point weren't literate in English, whether they had any literacy in their first language or not. They weren't able to then progress to an entry 1 course because of their literacy. And you know, I've had classes with a lot of SEND mixed in there as well, or potential SEND issues. So I'm just sharing what I've found over the last 3 years, what seems to be working quite well for me in my setting. So what we've done this year is change the timetable for our 16 to 18s, and instead of having 2.5 days, which I think a lot of colleges seem to be doing, we offer 5 mornings for all of our 16 to 18s, and it's really been a bit of a game changer, to be honest. It's really increased the social and community aspect for the students. They all have their break at the same time. They're all in college every day, giving them a free breakfast every day, and most of them are entitled to a free lunch, so they're having a hot meal every day. And it's sort of preparing them for life in the UK. They're not really used to having to get up and be somewhere 5 mornings. So it's been really, really good for the learners to be in 5 mornings. And this is also the first year that we've split our pre-entry classes into a literate and a non-literate class, and I've been teaching the non-literate class. So some activities that I've found really helpful. Each morning, it doesn't matter what I'm teaching, whether I'm teaching maths or digital skills or English, I start with the phonics, the flashcards. So right at the beginning of the year, I started with the first 6 sounds. I don't know if you know anything about teaching phonics, but the SAT-PIN phonics, the level 2 synthetic phonics, and then building on that each week and increasing the number of sounds that we're learning, as well as adding in another tricky word, which is a word that's not phonetically spelt, so they have to learn it by looking at it and recognizing that word. I'm trying to have a tricky word that then can lead on to the topic that I'm teaching that week. So maybe it's, you know, I'm teaching the word have as a tricky word, but then they can use that when they're talking about, I have a headache, I have long hair. So it just gives them a bit more practice to learn that word and to recognize it. Sometimes they can make their own set of flashcards to take home and learn. And sometimes if they have the facility, they can put an app on their phone just to help them with recognizing the letter and remembering the sound that goes with the letter. Each day, as well as doing the flashcards, we then have a phonics day each week, which is a whole morning that I just dedicate just to phonics. We're recapping previous sounds and consolidating learning that we've already done, as well as then building on with a new sound and hopefully a targeted sound of the week, as well as a tricky word of the week. I've learned that they need a lot of practice with blending and segmenting the sounds. They can know all of the different sounds, but then putting them together to make a word is much trickier for them. So they need a lot of practice with that. But then it seems to be easier to pick up new vocabulary for them because they recognize in these sounds. So some of the types of activities that we do during the phonics day. I start with some Play-Doh phonics. I've used Play-Doh to try and work on strengthening their hands because some of these students have never picked up a pen before. So to get them to do any sort of writing, you know, they get to entry 1 and suddenly they're like, oh, teacher, my hand is hurting. So we're trying to sort of strengthen hands, strengthen the fine motor skills, as well as it's just another different way of doing the flashcards. So I might say the sound and then they would have to form the letter with the Play-Doh. So that's that. We did put in quite a lot of money into getting some new resources for the literacy classes. And one of the things that we did invest in was these phonics blocks. So it's been really helpful in blending and segmenting. They can break them up to segment them. They can see how many different sounds each word has got in them and then build a word. So I might say a word with a targeted sound in it, and they have to choose all the different letters. They can see how many sounds each word has got. Another activity that we've been doing quite a lot of is like cutting and sticking, again to help with the fine motor skills using scissors. But this one in particular has really helped with the segmenting of the sounds again. And these are, you know, there's loads and loads of stuff on Twinkle that help with this sort of thing. And this one is a favourite of my students anyway. They love it when I get the word searches out. But there's loads of things like with a targeted sound, which is helping with recognising the spelling patterns, recognising, especially when it's a digraph, a 2-letter sound. But also it just feels like a little bit of a brain break for the learners. They don't actually think that they're doing any work, but they really love it. They get really competitive. And then the other thing I do when I am teaching new vocabulary is to sort of break it down with the dots and the dashes, as you can see with the word phonics here, to try and help them to then spell out a word phonetically so that I'm just giving them that little bit of support to be able to do it in an independent way. Other things that have helped me is getting the right level of books. So especially for the really low level who are just starting out, getting that level 2 synthetic phonics and then building onto a level 3 has been really helpful. I've used reading books every single day in my classes. I use it as a starter activity, and then once a week I listen to every student read their book, and if they're fluent in that book, sort of like a school situation, then they can change their reading book. And again, they're getting really competitive about how often they're changing their reading book, and seeing them, like, you know, have a little bit of pride in their own reading progress. I'm logging their reading progress every week so that they can see the progress that they're making as well. And again, putting apps on their phones just to encourage them to be a little bit more independent and to practice outside of classes. Other things that I've used, there's a Teach Your Monster to Read game, which is something that I've just had on my phone for ages, using it with my kids. Where it's a paid app on your phone, you can use it as a teacher for free. And we have a class set of iPads that we use every week in our digital skills lessons. So they're just, you know, we're just using it for half an hour just to work on our phonics. And again, they're getting really competitive over who, you know, who's got the most percentage on this. I've found that my students prefer to write with a pencil or on mini whiteboards. So especially when they've never picked up any pen before, it can be a bit daunting for them to like put pen to paper, and because, you know, it's not, that's there, then you can see all their mistakes, whereas they love to write with a pencil, and you know, I've got a rubber right here and they're fighting over the rubbers, or on mini whiteboards you can just straight erase it. So it's just a way of building a bit more confidence. And also I use name cards all the time just to get them to recognize their own name. I can move them about, and it's a really good way of just keeping track, you know, seating plan and things like that, but also they're recognizing their own name. And just be mindful about the resources that you're using. A lot of phonics resources are obviously aimed at children, and with our age group, it needs to be age appropriate. Some of the resources are more age appropriate than others, so try and adapt things if possible. I found, like, you know, using an actual photograph of something rather than like the cartoon image that might come along with it has been a more effective way of making it so that things are less childish. And that's it really. Thank you very much, and I'm happy to answer any questions.
Okay, thank you so much, Lucy. Lots of really interesting suggestions for deploying phonics techniques and other techniques actually for pre-entry learners. I'm going to stop sharing this now because there's just a slide which says discussion on it. So we're having a discussion. If you've got any questions for either or both of Cathy and Lucy, this is your chance either to speak up, or you might have written something in the chat or want to write something in the chat. And now someone's been tracking Claire's been tracking the chat, haven't you?
Yeah, yeah. Yes, so Hazel's just asked, I've got questions written down here, and Hazel's just asking one that I was going to ask. Which apps do you use to practice at home? That's for Lucy.
So the main one that I've been putting on students' phones would be like something like the Jolly Phonics app, which it is aimed at children, but it's got quite clear. It's got really clear. You can sort of spell out the letters, and you can have the sound come in with it. You just have to be careful to kind of direct them away from like anything that is too childish, too babyish, because you know a lot of them are centered on children. But I found that the Jolly Phonics one is much clearer and less babyish.
And a similar question, Lucy, which reading books do you use in class?
Oh gosh, we spent so much money on getting some really good books. I can't remember off the top of my head which ones they were now.
Were they designed for adults, or were they a children's phonics scheme?
I don't think the ones that I'm thinking of at the phase 2 one. I think they are sort of probably child's, but they're with like pictures rather than drawings. They're with photographs, so they don't feel as childish. And also there's quite a lot of sort of scientific books. So there's like one about bees, there's one about trains. They're much more like the non-fiction books are better, I've found.
Thank you. And there aren't any other questions in the chat, but I do have one more question. Could you just talk a bit more about the phonics blocks? Because I couldn't see, do they have letters on them, or is it just that the colour represents the phoneme?
Yeah, so the blue blocks are all consonants, so they have the sound written on them. The red ones, I think, are vowels, and then the different colours are, so some of them are a blend, so it might be CR, CL. Some of them are have a vowel sound, but it's a 2-letter vowel sound, so they're using, so whichever sound we're focusing on that week, I'll just add in that block, and they can sort of identify when they need to use that block.
I see. Okay. Thank you. Cathy, there's a question for you here. It says, what resource, Ellie's asking, what resources have you used with your sound wall, particularly the manner of articulation one with the mouth?
I think that's another one for Lucy, not me.
Yeah, I was going to say that was Lucy. Yeah, so Lucy, I don't know if
Sorry,
you heard
can you repeat the question?
Yes, certainly. What resources have you used with your sound wall, particularly the manner of articulation one with the mouth?
So the sound wall is the display that I've got up in my classroom. So when I'm teaching a new sound, when we're introducing a new sound, I found that it helps to have that up all the time, so that they've got a reference to what the grapheme is and sort of a picture to go with that, and as well as having the mouth sound so that they know what sort of shape their mouth should be making when they're making that sound. So I'm using it when I'm introducing a new sound, as well as, you know, going back over and refreshing what we've done before. I've also got a couple of students who have got a bit of a speech impediment, so it's been really helpful for them to have it up just to sort of reinforce, oh, my mouth needs to be doing this at this time.
Thank you, Lucy. I think it's Chloe has just suggested some books. She said S&L readers, Gatehouse books, and Forward with Phonics. So I think that's just...
Yeah, those are the ones that I'm using. She's in my room at the moment, I think.
Oh, lovely. Great, thank you. John, shall I? There are several questions in the chat now, but
There are, yeah.
Nassim has a hand up. Do you want to?
Yeah, shall we just go to Nassim first and then go back?
Thank you. A question to Lucy, please. Something I have noticed time and again with the students regarding the influence of the Yorkshire accent, with a specific reference to the sound. And every time I teach them the word cub and bus, and they always come back to me, no, teacher, it's bus, it's cub. And I would try to highlight it. I mean, I have always learned it as cub and bus. And so I used to correct it really. But then I thought, come on, we live in Yorkshire and the students hear it all the time. And I mean, this is just one example. So is it something I should continue kind of highlighting and correcting? Or, you know, this Yorkshire accent, just highlight it and let them speak the way they hear it?
Yeah, I mean, what I do personally is I would point out that I'm from Yorkshire and this is how I say it, but you might hear other people saying it differently. But the way I say it is a very Yorkshire way anyway. But yeah, I don't think there's anything wrong with pointing that out and saying, okay, you might hear it in two different ways.
So yeah, it's not wrong. It is one way of saying the same thing. It is not wrong.
I don't think there's a wrong answer.
Thank you.
Okay. There's one I'm aware that Claire, that Zaheda's question is there, but I just wanted to bring a bridge from the point that Cathy makes in the chat, but before turning to Zaheda's question about participatory approaches, because I think it's a really, you know, it's one of the things I got marked down from when Cathy was talking and saying, well, participatory approaches are the real way forward in terms of literacy issues. So she's asking whether Lucy or anyone else has used participatory approaches when they're in the pre-entry classroom in this kind of way. Any comment from Lucy or anyone else really, or Cathy actually?
I haven't really used it. I don't find that it's something that I prefer a much more structured approach. So I don't have very much experience in it.
Right. Cathy, do you want to make some comment about why you think this is a particularly useful kind of approach in relation to
I mean, I think it's a challenge. It is a challenging approach. I think that's kind of, I guess, where I'm reflecting on that. I've just commented on Hazel's comment about using the language approach with the volunteers in Savty, because I did work with Hannah when they did a action research project about looking at this and how could they support their volunteers in using these kinds of approaches. So, for example, the language experience approach is something I've been talking about with my CELTA trainees, as I said, for a long time, but it never really felt like there was an opportunity for them to really explore using that within the sort of confines of the CELTA course. But one of my trainees has this year on the Cert ESOL, which is why I'm thinking about the flexibility of the Cert ESOL qualification. So basically, the trainee I mentioned, she has one class a week with a beginner adult class, very similar to what I guess what we're familiar with, isn't it, with adults? And the idea is that the text comes from the students. It was so interesting observing her as like a kind of a beginner ESOL teacher with this beginner class, right? But how she kind of generated all this language from the students. So she did lots of work with them with the language and then generated these sentences, and she just had 4 sentences that she generated. She brought these pre-prepared strips of paper. The students copied these sentences onto the strips of paper. So there was lots of reading, rereading. They were reading them on the strips of paper. They then chopped the strips of paper up and they have to rearrange them. And again, in that class, so interesting to see the higher level students, actually, were a little bit more literacy, were able to read them quite quickly, reorganize them, and then they moved on to the writing of it. But those with the real low level could really spend some time and look at those individual words, but they knew that they'd understood the text because they generated the text. So you kind of covered the meaning there, really. it isn't a phonics approach, is it? Because you know, you can't, if the students are generating the language, you can't kind of get that pattern that you might need if you were taking more of a phonics approach to this. So I do think it's challenging. I think, like, yeah, I recognize what you're saying, Lucy. You kind of got to, it's not so structured, is it? Because you're letting go and you have to be reliant on the students bringing that language, and then, you know, confident in your own language awareness that you can then, you know, do something with that in the class with them. But yeah, it is something that, yeah, quite passionate about and really interested in, like I say, in those sort of bottom-up approaches, isn't it? Again, I'd be interested maybe in what Hazel's saying about what's happening in Savty now, and how the volunteers are sort of, yeah, working with these sorts of approaches, drawing on students' language.
Hazel, do you want to come in now?
Yeah, just to say, it's a really timely question, and we've just been discussing it in a meeting this morning and thinking, where do we go with this approach, and how far, you know, what do we want to try and do in terms of participatory ESOL? And I think maybe we've overlooked really that our volunteers are taking a participatory ESOL approach, because one of our fundamental things is training the volunteers to use the language experience approach, how you just described, with lots of strips of paper. And I think it works really well in a one-to-one setting. It's a perfect technique, especially because you've got a lot more flexibility when you're working one-to-one or with small groups. So it's really, we find it very effective, the language experience approach. But yeah, we're kind of in a discussion phase really about whether we're going to explore some more participatory ESOL techniques in terms of further workshops and things more widely. Yeah.
It might be interesting if somebody would come along, like our ESOL research community meeting, the next one.
I just had that thought. Thank you. Yeah.
Mel Cook's obviously done a big lead on this, and the Action for ESOL people in London. They're doing a lot of work on that. I'm really interested in her. She's going to take a historical approach, because it is fairly new, isn't it? And what we've kind of learned from that.
Yeah, and just some of the things you're describing there, Cathy, in the classroom with the trainee, perhaps are things which will help to address Zaheda's question in the chat about what can be done in that community setting with learners who are mixed ability. It's a short course. How would you approach teaching non-literate learners in that context? So I think doing that kind of thing of mixing up the sentences in that kind of way and getting people at different levels to kind of engage in that way is one really effective way, quite possibly. But as Hazel says, it probably works best with either one-to-one or in the small group approach.
I think Claire's put a comment as well, like she says she likes the language experience but struggle with a group setting. So there is actually a video available. There's 2 videos that I've used. There's one of Judy Kurth where she does it one-to-one. That's really good. It's available on the British Council website. There's another one where somebody does it in a group setting. And that was the one that my trainee kind of modeled it on, that idea that actually you generate it from the whole group. So lots of group reading, and then they write their own. So in groups, they get given the strips, and each group writes just one each, and then the strips of paper get passed around. So it's like an adaptation of it from doing it one-to-one to a group setting.
And is that in a group, you mean like a sort of group of 15 to 20, 25?
Yeah, I'm trying to think how many she had when I observed her do it. I mean, there must have been.
Yeah.
There was definitely double figures of students that were in there.
Because, you know, one thing that's emerging from this is a sort of a danger of creating a kind of, you know, a classic division between the sort of more formal a college-based learning and the kind of learning you get in the community sector. And that's something which I kind of instinctively feel we need to kind of not let occur, if you know what I mean.
Well, my colleague Sam Shepherd, I don't know if anybody knows him, he's just completing his PhD where he's looked at using participatory approaches in a large further education college.
Absolutely, yeah. And you know, those kind of models and the film that you're talking about, Cathy, I don't know if you got the link for that film.
I'll have a look for it.
Maybe have a look for it, and then we can include it in the mail that we send round to everybody after this session. I'm just mindful of the time now, and I want to pass over to Safina, my colleague Safina, because although we've come to near the end of our hour, this is not the end of the conversation, because well, I'll let Safina explain.
John, you can carry on if you want, John. You can carry on if you want.
I'll just share the slides again, Safina, so that you can
just some amazing examples and discussions being taken place. And I think the reason why we thought of having this new feature, so we're going to do an ESOL ESOL lunchtime soapbox. It's going to give an opportunity to actually have an hour where we can continue on this conversation around literacy. But if anybody wants to showcase their initiatives that they're doing in their area, please put it in chat with your email. And also if you've got any challenges, or if you just want to share any ideas that we can sort of network together, good practices, what's working well for tutors as well. Just, I think it's really nice to hear the different examples, and people can take away thoughts and ideas of how they can adapt that for their own particular learners. So with that in hand, so we've got the next showcase for you to save on Literacy Soapbox on the 11th of March at 12:30 again. So just save that date because we'll send the details forward shortly. But also just in the chat, if you do want to showcase your initiative, please put your contact details in, because one of the team members will actually contact you. You'll get a 5-minute slot to present your initiative around ESOL literacy. And just to follow on from that, because we've got 2 minutes, I'm going to put a link to our evaluation form. So if you could fill that in, that would be really appreciated. Thank you. I'll give 2 minutes to everyone to fill that in. So you've got some time to fill that in now.
Great, thanks, Safina. So there's a QR code there as well to take you to the evaluation form. The link's in the chat, and also we'll send that around in a mail that follows this session and comes before the follow-up session on the 11th of March. And it's a little way away, but not too far away. And what we'll do is when we mail you before that, so after this session rather, we'll include a link to the recording of this session, so that when we get towards the 11th of March, you could maybe drop in and have another look to refresh your memory of the things we talked about during today's hour, so that we can really have that continuation from this session to give people voice to explain their own challenges and their own ways of addressing issues to do with literacy in the ESOL classroom. And certainly Lucy and Cathy have really helped us to set some agendas and really got us thinking about different ways of approaching this issue. So it is 1:30. Is it 1:30? Yes.
29. We've got 1 minute. People can still fill in the form.
There's nothing pressing to come out of the chat. Is there, Claire, that we need to pick up or mention, or just?
No, I did just put a little reply to Zahida. I don't know if she's seen it. Just I wasn't sure we answered her question fully, and I just said that I agree that sort of 10 to 12 weeks there isn't time to do a full phonics program, but just to encourage her that I thought what she was doing was focusing on names and addresses of learners for writing was a really good idea, and then lots of speaking and listening.
Yeah.
So yeah,
absolutely. Yeah, thanks for picking that up, Claire. I'm going to stop sharing this now so that we can properly say.
John, Deborah's asking if we'll have access to the recording.
Absolutely, yeah. I will, once it's processed and everything, I'll put together a mail and send it round to everyone that registered for the event. And please do follow it up. If anyone wants to contribute to the Soapbox Showcase, bit of a mouthful, but that's what we're calling the next one, then please drop us a line, as Safina says, 5 minutes, just to raise an issue, tell us about something you're doing, that kind of thing, and that will be the framework really for further discussion of this issue, because clearly there's plenty more to say. Okay, we'll stop there. Thank you very much for attending, everybody.
Thank you,
Thanks
everyone.
again to Cathy and Lucy. Fascinating, and we hope to see you all
In March.
next time in March. Yeah.
March.
Okay. Bye-bye.
Everyone, bye.
Should we just move these two